Your mind is like an instrument, and if you want to play an instrument at a good level, let's say for example the guitar, well, you're going to have to regularly challenge yourself with difficult chords. You'll have to practice for long hours and show up even on the days when you don't feel like it. Because if you were to never push yourself to practice those tough songs or skip practice when it gets hard, suddenly over time your fingers won't stay agile, your playing will stagnate, and you'll lose the ability to perform at your best or even lose the ability to play at all. And well, the human mind works in the exact same way. If you don't expose your mind to discomfort, such as resisting immediate temptations or doing hard tasks, your mental strings will become loose and your mind will become weak. Your mind will no longer be sharp enough to face difficulties, and like a badly tuned guitar, it will fall out of sync. Over time, your mind will lose the ability to make rational decisions or stay in control, and instead you will become a slave to your own emotions and distractions. Just like how an unpracticed guitarist will struggle to play anything beautiful. And so what am I really talking about? Well, when we lose the skill of being able to do something uncomfortable or difficult, we essentially weaken our ability to exercise self-control. Over time, we become more reactive to immediate pleasures and less capable of making intentional long-term decisions. And this can become quite a dangerous path to go down. For example, let's take the pleasure of food. If you don't have the ability to say no to constant temptation and endure the uncomfortable feeling of either being hungry or not getting exactly what you want, and you find yourself eating anything that's put in front of you or whatever you please, this could eventually lead you down a path of getting sick or a path of diseases. And so when we don't have the ability to say no to these pleasures and endure discomfort, we end up being controlled by them. These pleasures might make us feel good in the moment, but long term they don't truly add to our happiness or well-being. And so is there a skill we can acquire that can help us to regain control of our emotions and stop ourselves from being led by our feelings or our desires? Yes, this skill is called self-discipline. Self-discipline is the ability to control your emotions and behaviors despite facing those temptations or impulses. And just like how a guitarist can only be good at playing through constant practice, your mind will only have the ability to control your impulses through constant practice. And so let's get into 3 practices you can do every day to build up your self-discipline skill. Number 1, cold exposure. At the moment, I've been going down to the sea every morning and getting in just for 5 minutes. And trust me when I say every day, I do not want to get in. Now, obviously, you don't need the sea to do this. You can have a cold shower or use a bath. But the reason that I do this is because I know by just enduring that tiny discomfort of just 5 minutes of my day, I am teaching myself a valuable skill. That it's okay to feel uncomfortable sometimes. You're not going to die, although it honestly does feel like that sometimes. But it's just a moment of discomfort that passes. And you might be thinking, well, what is that actually achieving? Objectively, all I'm doing is getting in the water, being there for 5 minutes, and then getting out. But when you think about it in terms of building up the skill of discipline, it makes much more sense. Because every day I am faced with the challenge of I do not want to get into that water. Literally every day my mind is like, Heather, don't do it, don't go in. My desire is to stay comfortable, it's to stay warm, it's to stay in bed or wrapped in my coat. But by me choosing to still get into that water, I'm showing myself that I have the ability to override my feelings. I have the ability to override my mind, my desires, my thoughts. I am literally practicing the very act of not listening to my emotions. And this is a very valuable skill that overflows into other areas of your life. For example, I go for a run most mornings, but I definitely don't always feel like going for a run. Sometimes I'm tired, sometimes I haven't slept well, sometimes I just want to be warm. But because I regularly practice not listening to my emotions, I'm able to push through any resistance. Because you see, the thing is, a lot of us believe that we have to wait to feel a certain way to then do something. Like, I'm gonna wait around until I feel like running to then go on that run. Or I'm gonna wait around till I feel like studying before I study. But that's just simply not true, and it doesn't work. Because if you're waiting around for your feelings to dictate your actions, then you will be waiting around forever. Nothing would ever get done. And so self-discipline is the skill of feeling that resistance, feeling uncomfortable, feeling those temptations, but still choosing to act anyway. And so objectively, yes, all I'm doing is getting in the sea every morning and getting back out. But on a deeper level, this short practice every day teaches me to to not listen to my emotions or my temptations, and that I have the ability to override my feelings. Now, the second practice is fasting, and fasting means refraining from eating for a certain period of time. I've only just started incorporating this into my routine in the last few months, but I've been fasting till around 12 p.m, which is when I will have my first meal. Because the thing is, nowadays, if you're from a first world country, we have food everywhere. You just go into any supermarkets and there's aisles and aisles of endless food and things to buy. We can even just order food on our phone to our door. We don't even have to move to go get it. And it's clear to see that the quality of these foods have just become a massive problem, as they're just full of addictive chemicals, and it's just a load of processed crap, which is why many of us are becoming so sick. And so if we don't have the ability to resist temptations and say no to that office donut, or say no to that burger, or say no to that chocolate, if we don't have the ability to do that and we indulge in any instance we can, where is that going to lead us long term? Probably down a bad path. And so for me, fasting again is a method which teaches me a valuable skill. Can I sit with this feeling of hunger, this temporary feeling which literally passes within a few hours? Like, would I rather eat? Yes, of course. Honestly, if there was no long-term consequences to any of my actions, I would eat Maltesers and Snickers every day. They're like my favourite. Because I'm going to be honest, but I think I have quite an addictive personality. In the past, I was totally controlled by my emotions and my pleasures. I was addicted to looking at my phone and social media for hours of the day. I would be constantly eating sugary processed food, and I never really moved my body. And that past version of me is still inside of me. The Heather that desires to eat bad foods, the Heather that desires to watch videos all day, the Heather that desires to not move her body, she's still with me. But just the only difference now is that she's not in the driving seat. When she's pulled in by those temptations and wants to take over the wheel of the car, I'm able to now say no. No, I'm not going to act in that way, despite those emotions and temptations being there. And so the reason I practice discipline on a daily basis is because I know if I'm to give in to those short-term pleasures whenever I feel like it, they are not going to bring me long-term well-being. Now, I'm not saying you can't ever have some pleasure. Would it make a difference for one day? Probably not. For 2 days? Probably not. But it's when these independent actions accumulate and add up, that's when they have long-term consequences. Also, as a side note, I think fasting helps us to appreciate food so much more. Because when you have something all the time, you just don't appreciate it. Like if you have running water from a tap every day, we just get used to it and we lose appreciation. And so I've really seen how fasting gives me so much more of appreciation for food. Because when it's time to eat, I'm hungry, and so then I taste and enjoy the food so much more. And I actually really admire the practice of Ramadan that Muslims do once a year. From my understanding, Ramadan is a practice where Muslims fast from dawn to sunset every day for a month, and they refrain from eating food or water as a way to practice discipline and develop empathy for those in need by remembering to appreciate things much more. Sometimes we take these simple luxuries for granted every day. We always want more everything, more food, more clothes, more money, more stuff. And sometimes we forget that maybe everything we have is all that we need, and we just forget to appreciate it. And so for me, fasting for just a few hours of the morning helps me to be disciplined, but also as a bonus keeps me appreciating food much more. Now, number 3 is meditation. And I decided to put meditation in here because typically when we've become a slave to our emotions or our impulses, this usually happens so subconsciously, meaning we're not really aware. Sometimes we can be so unaware of what we're feeling, what we're thinking, or how we're acting, and we just end up reacting to everything that's happening to us without giving it much thought. Like, let's just take the example of scrolling on social media for hours. Typically, the reason people will do this is to distract themselves and avoid having to face their feelings. But instead of understanding what thoughts or emotions are driving them to do this behavior, they just react to the moment so subconsciously and act on their impulses. And what a lot of us fail to recognize in that moment of scrolling is that if we constantly do that behavior every day, long term, this is going to lead us down a bad path, such as never being able to achieve anything in our real lives, such as studying or going to work out, because we're just addicted to looking at the phone. And so when we are constantly coming from a place of reaction to our emotions instead of from a place of awareness, we will always just be led by our emotions and our thoughts, kind of like a dog on a lead just being dragged through life. And so practicing meditation is the skill of building awareness. It's the practice of learning how to not react to your emotions or your thoughts, but instead witness them. Like, I'm going to be honest, I had the thought that I didn't want to do this video today. I just really couldn't be bothered, but it's literally just a thought. And even though I had that thought, I can choose to be aware of it, but decide not to react to it. I'm able to just witness the thought but let it pass me by instead of reacting to them or making me behave in a certain way. And you literally only have to start with 5 minutes of meditation every day. Literally 5 minutes. Every single person can make 5 minutes. If we can go on our phones or watch TV for hours of the day, we can fit in 5 minutes of meditation. And so I'm going to leave you with this quote: "No man is free who is not a master of himself." I think it's clear to see with the way humanity's going that our pleasures and our desires are taking over control of us. And personally, I find it really sad because there's so many people's dreams and hopes which are just going to get flushed down the toilet because they can't control themselves. They will never truly experience their potential or know who they can be because they're being constantly led by their emotions and thoughts. And the only way to practice overriding our emotions is by exposing our minds to face discomfort. I hope this video could have helped you in some way. I appreciate your time. Thank you for watching.